All right, let's talk about Macbeth. But we're not just going to do a plot summary here. No, we are going deep. We're going to perform a kind of psychological autopsy on a man who had everything and then just threw it all away. This is about the engine inside the man, the thing that turns a hero into an absolute monster. And this quote right here, this is the key to the whole thing. Forget all that stuff about fate just pulling the strings. The real tragedy is about a man's desperate, all-consuming hunger for a guaranteed future. And look at that wording. He offers himself to ruin. It's a choice. He walks right into it, willingly. So that really brings us to the big question, right? How does this happen? I mean, we first meet Macbeth as this celebrated, heroic warrior. By the end of the play, he's a paranoid butcher king. What on earth happens in between all that? Let's break down the anatomy of that terrifying transformation. Okay, so it all kicks off with that famous prophecy from the three witches. It's just a little spark, but it lands in a very, very hungry mind. The real question, though, isn't just what the witches said, it's what their words did to Macbeth's brain. So you have to wonder, were the witches the direct cause? Were they puppeteers pulling his strings, forcing him to do this stuff? Or were they just a catalyst? Did they just light a fuse that was already there, waiting? Well, pretty much all the evidence points to that second idea. They didn't invent his ambition. They just gave it a GPS coordinate. I love how the scholar Stephen Greenblatt puts it. They don't plant some new desire in him. No, they just give his vague, simmering ambition a clear, actionable script. And you got to remember, for a man like Macbeth, a man of action, a script is a seriously dangerous thing. And here's the other part of this poison pill that's just so intoxicating. The scholar Emma Smith points out that the witches make the world feel like it has a secret design. Suddenly, life isn't just a bunch of random stuff happening. No, there's a hidden meaning, a destiny. And Macbeth feels like he's just been handed the key to unlock it all. Which leads us right to that famous floating dagger. Now, this isn't some ghost haunting him. Think of it more as a psychological rehearsal. It's Macbeth's own mind building a bridge from the horrible thought of murder to the actual physical act. It lets him make the unthinkable feel fated, inevitable, like he's not choosing to do it, but being led. But Macbeth, he doesn't cross that bridge by himself. His ambition gets supercharged through this really crucial partnership with Lady Macbeth. And, well, that partnership is going to end up costing them both absolutely everything. You can actually watch their relationship just completely fall apart in 4 stages. At first, their shared secret creates this powerful, super dangerous intimacy. She puts on this performance of being fearless to harden his resolve. But then, the constant pressure of living this lie starts to create cracks. And finally, it all just shatters into total isolation. Turns out, murder is the ultimate poison for intimacy. And once they're isolated, their guilt just splits and goes in 2 completely different directions. Macbeth's guilt, it explodes outward. It becomes paranoia, constantly looking over his shoulder, and, more murder to cover his tracks. He acts out. But Lady Macbeth's guilt turns inward. It becomes a sickness in her mind, the sleepwalking, the hallucinations, that obsessive need to wash away a stain that only she can see. She completely breaks down. So as Macbeth's mind is crumbling on the inside, what does he do? He projects all of that terror out onto the entire country. His personal paranoia becomes his national policy. And who's his first target? His best friend, Banquo. Now why? It's not just because of the prophecy about Banquo's sons becoming kings. It's deeper than that. Banquo is a living, breathing moral judgment on Macbeth. He heard the exact same prophecy and chose a different path. He's a constant reminder that what Macbeth did was a choice, not destiny. He's basically Macbeth's conscience, but with a face. And this is exactly why that banquet scene is the real turning point of his whole reign. When Banquo's ghost shows up and only Macbeth can see him, his private terror just explodes into a very public, very political disaster. The mask of the calm, stable king is shattered in front of everyone, and they all see him for what he is: unstable, haunted, and really, really dangerous. So Macbeth feels his power slipping. And what does he do? He doubles down. He goes right back to the witches, desperate for the one thing he wants even more than power. He wants certainty. And this is where he walks straight into the final trap.
The witches give him 3 new prophecies, and they are basically a brilliant linguistic trap. See, for each one, Macbeth hears an ironclad guarantee of his own safety. None of woman born shall harm Macbeth. To him, that sounds like, I'm invincible. Or, until Birnam Wood comes to Dunsinane. That sounds like something that could never, ever happen. But these aren't promises, they're riddles, and each one has a clever little loophole that he's just too arrogant and too desperate to see.
And this is the absolute key. As the scholar Cleanth Brooks says, this whole tragedy is interpretive. Macbeth isn't tricked by some supernatural magic. He is destroyed by his own terrible reading comprehension. All of his confidence, that feeling of being untouchable, it's all built on him willfully misreading some very tricky language.
So, as the whole thing unravels and Macbeth finally faces his end, what's the lesson here? What are we supposed to take away from this epic downfall? Well, first, even though the tyrant is gone and a new king is on the throne, this is not your simple happily ever after ending. Not at all. Sure, order is restored, but the kingdom is scarred. It's been through a trauma. The people have learned what it's like to live in pure fear, and that's a lesson a country doesn't just forget.
And that brings us to the final and kind of chilling takeaway. This play doesn't give us a cure for tyranny, it gives us a warning. The conditions that created Macbeth in the first place, a culture that glorifies violence, a hunger for power, those things don't just magically disappear when the tyrant dies. The new order is fragile.
And so, we end up right back where we started. The ultimate lesson here isn't about avoiding witches in the woods. It's about a danger that lives inside all of us. It's about that temptation to look at our own ambition, our own desires, and call it fate, and to mistake our desperate need for certainty as some kind of virtue.